Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is the second webinar in our autumn virtual event series. Tonight, you'll learn effective strategies to reduce anxiety during a crisis. I'll be your host this evening. My name is Adrienne Brown, and I'm the sales coordinator here at the Village at Augsburg. This evening, you'll hear from our sales director, Suzanne Roos, and our special guest presenter, Kimberly Claiborne. She is a licensed clinical professional counselor. Before we get started this evening, however, I would like to go through a few housekeeping items. If this is your first webinar, you'll notice that your audio and video are disabled. And that's for two reasons. One, it allows you to focus on the presentation at hand, and also it eliminates any distractions for our presenters. If you join me in looking at the bottom of your screen. If you're on your computer, you may need to shake your mouse a little. You'll see a chat tab at the bottom. We will not be using the chat this evening. However, you will be able to ask questions using the Q&A tab. If you click on that tab, you'll get a pop-up box. You'll then be able to type in your question, hit submit, and I will receive that, and we'll try to answer all questions at the end of the presentation. And right now, for those of you who joined a little early, there was a poll question. That question was, how long have you been considering moving to a senior living community? First response was less than 1 year, 3 or more years, or I haven't thought about it. And it looks like it's a 50-50 split between less than 1 year and 3 or more years. So Suzanne, right now I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Adrienne. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for our webinar. It was a beautiful fall day today, and I'm really grateful that you took some time to join us this evening. As Adrienne said, I'm the sales director here at Augsburg, and Adrienne and I work very closely together as a team, and we make sure that when you move to our community, you have a smooth transition. I'm usually the first person that you will meet if you're considering our community for your future. And over the course of many weeks and months, we'll get to know each other, and I will help you navigate your path to selecting our community for your future. I know that many of you who are joining us tonight are already very familiar with Augsburg, so thank you for returning. It's nice to see you again. But we do have a few new guests, and for their benefit, I want to take just a few minutes to introduce you to our community. The Village at Augsburg is what's known as a continuing care retirement community. And that means that we offer several options of lifestyles and levels of care for our residents. We have 132 apartment style homes for those who live independently. We also offer assisted living, short-term rehab, and long-term care, all here on our campus, for residents who require more support and healthcare services. And as an entire community, we're designed to serve approximately 350 residents. We are located on a beautiful 52-acre wooded campus here on Campfield Road, and we've been here since 1929. We were actually founded in 1892 as an orphanage, and we transitioned fully to senior care about 1970, and that's when the orphanage was discontinued. We do have a very long, rich history in Baltimore, and this past January of 2020, we became affiliated with National Lutheran Communities and Services as part of their family of senior living communities. We've had a really wonderful experience being a part of the NLCS family, and we know that there's a lot ahead for us in terms of future growth under their guidance. So we're really excited about that affiliation in the future that we have. So tonight's webinar should last about an hour. It may go a little under an hour, but we really want to be mindful of your time, and we'll do our best to stay on track. And so you are welcome to submit questions as Adrian explained. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll be able to answer, Kimberly will be able to answer those questions if there are any. And if you don't have, if you don't want to submit any, that's completely fine. We will send you Kimberly's contact information as well. So you'll get that in an email and follow up so that you could reach out to her directly if you wanted to. So 2020 has been a year for the record books. None of us have experienced anything like this year. There's been lots of stressful, anxiety-producing situations that have made a lot of us pause and reflect on life. And between coronavirus and politics and social and racial tensions and masks and social distancing, we're all trying to cope. And we're all feeling fatigued. I know that's the word that I use a lot to describe how I feel after the last 7 months. But tonight, we are very fortunate to have a wonderful panelist who is going to share with us some ways that we can learn to build resilience and function during stressful situations. Kim Claiborne is the lead clinician with the Employee Assistance Program for Johns Hopkins University and Health System. She provides confidential counseling and referral services to employees of Johns Hopkins University and the health system there and their household family members. She is a licensed clinical professional counselor with a background in education and rehabilitation counseling. And prior to her current position, Kim worked for 13 years as a clinical supervisor in the Department of Psychiatry at Johns Hopkins Bayview Medical Center. So in addition to working at Hopkins, Kim has a part-time private practice, which allows her to volunteer with the Pro Bono Counseling Project of Maryland. And that is how she is sharing her time with us tonight. So please join me in welcoming Kim.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so glad that you reached out so that we could talk about some ways to reduce anxiety. As you mentioned, 2020 has been a very difficult year. And initially we discussed how to reduce anxiety related to crisis. But I think it's important to understand that before this crisis that we're all in now, which is the pandemic, occurred, people were having stressful situations in their lives prior. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that. And so my presentation is brief because I wanted us to have enough time to discuss any concerns that individuals may have. So hopefully people will feel comfortable to have discussion at the end.
Okay.
And I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay, and so again, my name is Kimberly Claiborne. As Suzanne mentioned, currently I am employed by Johns Hopkins University. However, I am not here today as a representative of the university. And we're going to talk about effective strategies to reduce anxiety and build resilience during a crisis. Our objectives tonight, I would like to think that we'll be able to discuss feelings experienced while we're in stressful situations or crisis, identify how stress and anxiety affect our bodies because they do, and then recognizing what we can and can't control during stressful situations. And then we'll discuss ways to build resilience. There are many definitions that individuals use related to stress, anxiety, and resilience. For the presentation tonight, I'd like us to be on the same page and have one working definition for each. And so I shared that here. And so we're looking at stress. And for the sake of this presentation, we're going to say that stress is any outside force or event that affects our body or mind. And many of you may be aware that there are two types of stress. Eustress, which gives us a feeling of fulfillment, and distress, which causes strain, anxiety, or suffering. And then anxiety, I see as an unhealthy thinking pattern. Anxiety can come on by its own. it can be a reaction to stress, or it can be a trigger to stress. And then resilience, we look at that in terms of the ability to emotionally cope with a crisis or stressful situation. I use this particular graphic of the stones and how they seem to be so balanced, because whenever I'm in stressful situations and have that feeling that I don't have control, I find it important to remind myself that I have to remain balanced. And so this graphic reminds me of that. So just to give some examples of stressful situations, again, eustress gives us that feeling of fulfillment. And so examples would be you're getting married, starting a new job, buying a house, celebrations. Those are all eustress. Unfortunately, we have distress, and that can include if we're caring for a sick loved one, if we lose our jobs, if you end a relationship, and also I wanted to include the pandemic. That is something you hear the term all the time. This is unprecedented times, which it is. And so for the most part, even though we're 7 months into this, everyone is still trying to navigate their way through the pandemic based off of the information that we're receiving on a daily basis. And so what are some of the feelings associated with stressful situations? Because of those situations that could be either considered eustress or distress, you'll find that you're going to have many different feelings. You may be excited that you're about to buy a house or a car or get married, but at the same time, if you're dealing with the pandemic, you can be angry that you can't communicate with your family and friends. You may feel lonely. And so there are many different feelings, and we can talk about some of this later on. Many different feelings. I think it's important for individuals to understand your feelings are just that. They're yours. You own them. Too many times we hear individuals make comments such as, oh, you shouldn't feel that way. You'll be fine. And so that's very dismissive. And so we want to make sure that we stay away from making comments such as that, because again, they're your feelings and you're going to feel a variety of symptoms and feelings associated with these stressful situations. And so reactions to stress. Many people don't realize that stress affects every area of our bodies. And so oftentimes when we're under stress, possibly meeting a deadline or having to do a task that we don't necessarily care for, we start to have these reactions to that and we don't even realize it. And so oftentimes you can point out, oh, I'm having a headache or I have tight muscles. Most people can identify that. But how many of us, you should think about how many of us notice that when I'm stressed out, I don't feel very confident about myself. I don't feel very confident about the task that I have to complete. Or you find yourself having issues with insomnia, difficulty falling asleep, waking up in the middle of the night, or waking up early in the morning and not being able to go back to sleep. And so it's important to understand that stress affects every system in our body. And so we have to be mindful of that and we have to take care of that. One of the ways that we can reduce anxiety is to really sit down and take inventory of what we can control and what we can't. That's very important. Related to the pandemic, I remember when the governor made the emergency announcement that at 5 o'clock, everyone had to be in the house except for going to the grocery store. And everyone ran to the grocery store and you got there and there was nothing. I don't have control over that. It's unfortunate, but I don't. And so once I take inventory of what I have control over and what I don't, that's going to help reduce my anxiety. So related to the pandemic, again, in this example, unfortunately, we don't have control over individuals that don't follow the rules related to social distancing, unless they're coming into your personal space or your home. We don't have control over the actions of others. We only have control over how we react to them. And so many times when people are experiencing stress, again, they may become fussy and irritable. And so we react to that. And so we need to be mindful of how we react to that. What can we control? A positive attitude. We can't necessarily change the situations that we're in, but we can change how we react to it. And so keeping a positive attitude, and instead of saying, oh my goodness, this will never end, negative thinking, you want to lead with positive thoughts. Start making plans of what you plan to do when the pandemic is over. Finding things to do at home, you have control of that. While you may not be able to go out and meet with family and friends at restaurants and do activities outside the home, there are things that you can do in the home. You can get creative. You can get on Zoom calls. They have games now, and I'm not endorsing Zoom or anything else, but you can play games with your family and friends and be in contact with them. I actually find that I keep in communication with my friends more frequently now since the pandemic than I did prior. Limiting social media. Because we are bombarded with so much information on a daily basis, it can become overwhelming, and that can be a stressor. And so you have to remember that you have control over that. You may want to just limit the amount of information that you take in on a daily basis. Building resilience. We're going to talk about that. Utilize your support systems. Remember, during this time with the pandemic, you're not the only person experiencing these distressing events. And so because of that, it's important to reach out, connect with your neighbors, family, or friends, and so that you all can provide one another with support. And it gives you a sense of not only strength, but a sense of community, which is very important during stressful times. Our support systems provide a safe place for us to express ourselves. It's okay to say to someone, you know, I'm having a rough day and I really would appreciate being able to talk to you. It is not necessary to go through every day like as if nothing is occurring to you. We're in the midst of unprecedented times. Lean on your faith. Connect with others that share your common belief system. Many people have spiritual or religious leaders. Pick up the phone or do a Zoom call with those individuals. Again, you may not be able to meet with them one-on-one in person, but they will be able to provide you with the support that you need. Also, try to stick to any spiritual or religious rituals that you had prior to the stressful situation or the crisis, such as the pandemic. Some people pray, some people meditate. It's important to try to have some type of structure within your days prior to the pandemic. Practicing self-care. This is so important, not only during stressful situations or during a crisis. This is important just to maintain ourselves. And so self-care is a deliberate practice to maintain physical, mental, and emotional health. Again, I mentioned be honest about your feelings. Share those feelings with others because you may find that they're feeling the same way. And so you can discuss that and brainstorm together about how are we going to beat this? How are we going to get over this? How are we going to maintain? Limit your intake of information and negative images. Of course, again, I mentioned social media, but also the news. You want to be mindful of where you're receiving your information from. News stations are on at 4:30 a.m. They go off at 10, they're back on at noon, they're back on at 4 and 6. And so oftentimes the information is repeated. And so you want to just be mindful of how much negative energy you take in. Participate in activities that bring you joy. Anything that you were doing that you found brought you joy before the pandemic, before the stressful situation, force yourself to do those because you're going to feel better. Some people find it helpful to journal. Pick up a book from the dollar store, and whatever your thoughts are, instead of holding on to them and those causing you more stress, write them out. And then possibly when you meet with your family member or friend or online support group, you can talk about those. Setting boundaries surrounding participation in disturbing conversations. Again, this is important. That thing that we have control over. And so while you may be on a Zoom meeting with someone and they want to just spend all of the time talking about, did you hear this in the news? Did you see this? The numbers are going up. You have control over saying, you know, I did see that, but I really would like to talk about how are you doing? Let's talk about supporting one another through all of this instead of rehashing what's going on. And then if you find that you're not able to receive the support that you need, or if you notice you're having an increase in the irritability, the inability to sleep, if you find that you are starting to do things like drink more or use illicit substances, then it may be time for you to seek assistance from a mental health professional. This would be a therapist or a social worker who can sit down with you and discuss your issues and come up with a plan of support for yourself. I'd also like to note that having an accountability partner would be very helpful. Again, this is someone that you can touch base with on a daily basis, a weekly basis, just to check in and say, hey, I know for a fact that you really like reading. Why don't you tell me about a book that you read this week? Accountability partners are great. And so I just read a quote the other day, and I thought I would share this with you because I found it to be, it just resonates with me, and it may resonate with some of you. And it says, you are not working from home. You are at your home during a crisis trying to work. And that resonates for me because I have been working remotely since March. And oftentimes individuals will say things like, oh, you have it so good, you're working from home. What's the problem? And so that quote really resonates with me and why I find it so necessary to practice self-care and to reach out to others, even being a mental health professional, so that I can receive the needed support. And this is just a list of some of the references that I used. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And hopefully we can have a dialogue, if you'd like, related to sharing information with us about some things that you find to be helpful with dealing with the pandemic or a stressful situation. Adrienne, is that possible?
Absolutely. So if anyone has any questions, please, again, at the bottom of your screen, you should see the Q&A tab. If you click on that tab, you can type in your question, hit submit, and I will receive that, and I will actually make sure that I ask that question aloud.
Okay, great.
So that Kim can answer that.
Great.
So Kim, you brought up a lot of really good points about self-care, which I will raise my hand and say that up until a few years ago that didn't exist, but I have come to appreciate things like yoga and massages, which are a great way to relax. Right. That of course was limited over the last 6 months, so I couldn't really enjoy that. But I think a lot of the residents who live here at Augsburg, they were in quarantine, but we were still able to do things with them to engage them. And some people who are watching may not have they may live alone, they may not have a family nearby that's checking in on them. So in a lot of cases, they may be more isolated. So one of the things that a lot of times when someone is looking to move here to a senior community, there's a lot of discussion about isolation and how that adds to anxiety and stress.
Absolutely.
And is there, as we're approaching the winter months, are there any tips that you can suggest for someone who is living, and feels that they're isolated? Anything that could get them to, reach out to participate more, whether it's in things like this or, lots of options, I'm sure.
Right. And I think part of the issue is many people feel that there are no options. Oftentimes I speak to clients and they say, oh, I wasn't aware of that particular resource, because if for individuals that don't necessarily have a strong support system, there are hotlines that they can call if they feel that they need immediate support for Baltimore City, Baltimore County, but many people don't know about those resources. There are also lots of support groups online during this time because they understand that individuals can't get together physically. So I would look at going online and researching, or having someone assist in researching those supports for you. Also, because it gets dark so early, our brains are just wired. If it's dark, it's bedtime. And then you look at the clock and you realize, oh, it's only 6 p.m. And so some things that I find to be helpful are making sure that I stay up and do some type of activity. Don't get too comfortable. Don't go lay down, because you're going to fall asleep. Also, the use of a sun lamp is very helpful. And a sun lamp you can find anywhere. I don't want to endorse certain products or businesses, but a sun lamp ultimately gives you the impression of the natural light that is outside. Because again, it gets dark outside early. Our homes, most people don't have the greatest lighting in their home. And so if you turn that on in whatever room that you're in, you get the impression that it's earlier in the day. And so again, you have that signal going to your mind, I should be up, awake, and doing things.
I just want to jump in on that because I actually own one of those lamps, and it really does work. And again, I'm not endorsing any particular sun lamp or whatever, but I do use one at this time of year because in the mornings, it's usually, when it gets dark, I use that. I turn it on while I'm getting dressed, and it actually gives me I feel like it gives me a kind of boost, and I'm ready to start my day.
Yeah, right. And also for those individuals that work, many people use it at work because, again, most lighting in your office is that fluorescent lighting. It's not very bright. And so again, especially on a cloudy day, you look out the window and you're just like, I have no energy. I have no motivation to do anything. So even using it at your place of employment could be helpful.
One of the other things that I think is important, and it is not often talked about with this, but nutrition is really going, what you feed yourself is gasoline in the car. Everybody hears that same kind of, analogy. So I've talked to many folks over the last few months who have, said they're having trouble getting to the grocery store, or when they get to the grocery store, like, as you mentioned, there's nothing there. Early on in the pandemic, that was the case, and people, it was sort of like, where are we living that we can't even get bread and toilet paper? And so I often think too that, again, when people are living alone, they sort of forget that important part of nutrition as part of self-care and as a part of,
absolutely,
and not even needing to go out and eat. There's so many food delivery services, so you can treat yourself and have something brought in. We did that a lot. We are actually have been delivering our meals because our residents can't gather together in a dining room setting. We just started that again a few weeks ago, where they can come together in a dining room.
Okay.
So it's a little bit different here in this setting than the people who are watching us from home tonight, but it's been an important part of how we've responded to this this pandemic, and not trying not to add more stress to the lives of our residents. So that's been an important component, making sure that their daily routine was not interrupted as much as
Right. Routine is so very important for all of us. You know, oftentimes we talk about maintaining a routine for children, but adults, it's so important, because if we go off that routine, I have been guilty over the last 7 months, and anything that's downstairs in the refrigerator, for some reason, I feel I need to eat it right now. You do, and you say, oh my gosh, I feel horrible. I've gained weight. And so it leads to this downward spiral of how you feel. And so maintaining that routine of, nope, I get up in the morning and I either pray or I do yoga and then I eat something, is so important to maintain that routine.
I did want to jump in here real quickly. We did have a comment / question. It says, moving from a house after living 30 years to an apartment, stressful. Trying to adjust is overwhelming. If you could comment on that.
Wow, that's a long time. And so you have a lot of memories in that space. And so for that, I think having a partner that you could talk to, may it be a friend, a family member, excuse me, or if it's someone that's moving to your community, to have a staff person be able to sit down and talk to them. What is it that you're going to miss about that house that you lived in for so long? And is there something in that conversation that you can replicate moving into an apartment? And because many times it's the memories, excuse me, it's the memories and not necessarily the things. And so if you can replicate some of the wonderful memories that you had in that environment, in your new environment, I think you will find that to be very helpful.
Yeah, I would say one of the things that Adrienne and I do with anyone who's moving into our community, you know, it's never a process that happens in 2 weeks. It's not instant.
Right.
You know, you're thinking about this for a long time. And so you're building a relationship with us, with other residents who live here, because we'll try to bring you in and have you attend. If you can come in and attend an event, if in these circumstances now, it would be a little different. We would partner you up with some residents who you could talk with on the telephone before you move here.
That's wonderful.
And just get familiar. One thing that I experienced, I met a woman who had lived in her home for 40 years. She raised her family there, and she was so sad about losing the view from her patio. She had a nice gazebo in her yard, and she said, I'm so sad I won't see that anymore. And I suggested to her to start taking a photo of that view each season.
Absolutely.
And so that she would have that view and a photo of it, and got them framed. So when she moved into her new apartment, she had those 4 photos, and she really didn't miss the memory because it was there. So
absolutely, she was able to capture it.
That was a good thing. You know, the other thing too, when you move from a house into an apartment, you are decluttering and downsizing, and you are you're reviewing your life, if you will. You're reviewing and you're looking at all these things that you've accumulated. And the way we live now, your kids don't want it. your neighbor doesn't want it. You know, nobody wants your stuff. It's just, it's the reality. So it is, it doesn't sound like it, but I have experienced it to be a very cleansing process to declutter. I know
Clutter can be
April,
stressful.
yeah, in March and April, a lot of people were like packed at Home Depot because they were doing all these home projects, you know?
Exactly.
You know, getting rid of everything. And it does sort of give you a restart when you move into a new community. And even though it's a smaller environment than where you're coming from, you are automatically coming into a place where there's a lot of support systems in place already for you. You know, there's a lot of staff here. There's a lot of neighbors who will be very eager to meet you and kind of help with that transition. So sometimes it's more of what you're thinking it's going to be than what the reality of it is, which
Absolutely.
you're
right. And so we have control over our thinking. And so we have to think positive thoughts, positive affirmations. If necessary, I tell people, write them down and stick them around your house or apartment. Because again, we can be so consumed with negative thoughts, negative images, because they're fed to us every day. It really is a task to say, wait a minute, I'm not going to be upset about leaving my home of 30 years. Because again, you see things on television, the people have the boxes packed up and they close the door and they cry, and it's so emotional and it's distressing to some individuals. And so if we reframe the way that we think about it and not look at it in terms of this is ending and I have to start something else, which can be distressing, and see it as I had wonderful memories in this particular environment. This is part of a journey for me. And now I'm going to a new place where I'll be able to develop new memories versus I have to start over. This is horrible. I don't want to do this. So it's so important to reframe our way of thinking about things.
There are also resources for people who do need help with the downsizing part. So sometimes that's what overwhelms people. They're sitting there looking at, you know, a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom house, and they're saying, how do I even start with this?
Right. Where do I start?
Yeah.
Where do I start? And like you said, early in March and April, people were doing these home improvement ideas. And if you really think about it, you can sit down and make a list. What is important to me? Why is this important to me? What do I want to keep? Sometimes we keep things because someone gave it to us and they say, you should never get rid of that. We don't necessarily want it. We just keep it for those reasons. And so something that I actually do, well, I try to do once a month, I go through my house, including the kitchen, and I say, do I really need this? Or am I just holding on to it? And I let it go. I put it in a box. Am I going to use this in the next 30 days? If not, I put it in the box.
Yeah.
Because that's cleansing for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's very cleansing for me.
I do the same at the end of every season. So it's like, if I didn't use it this summer, it's
exactly
a box that's going to go to, you know, a donation center. And because if I didn't use it this summer, I'm probably not going to use it next summer.
Exactly. Because something new will be out next summer. So I'm going to want that.
Right.
Maybe clothing, an article of clothing, or a piece of furniture. So absolutely.
Right.
And there are things that you can do with those items. It doesn't just have to be that you throw them away, because again, that can be distressing for someone. But looking for opportunities to share with someone else that may not have, to donate those items.
And there are great resources also for that. You know, here at Augsburg, we partner a lot with the Lutheran Mission Society.
Okay.
A lot of our residents, when they are moving from independent living and they are leaving to go to perhaps a higher level of care here, assisted living, or maybe they're moving into the nursing home, So they are downsizing again from an apartment, and really there's not a lot that they need to bring with them to the next level of care. So a lot of times we work with the family and direct things to the Lutheran Mission Society. But there's so many people in need, and there's so many ways that you can share, and that is a very I think that feeds the soul of a lot of people. That is can be very fulfilling to know that you've done that.
To be helping others, absolutely.
Which is a great stress reducer, because now it's not yours to have to worry about anymore.
Right, and you don't have to say, okay, I'm going to move it from this corner to the other corner, and then I'm going to move it from this room to another room.
Right.
So again, changing your way of thinking. Wow, I no longer have use for this item, but there's someone else that will benefit from it.
Yeah. So before we wrap up here tonight, Kim, we're still in that very kind of unique part of the season here, where we're going to come into the flu season in the fall, and we've got an election coming up, and people are still very tense about things. So any other all of your recommendations especially about the news and the media and social media are great suggestions. Anything else that we can do to kind of get us through the winter, to know that spring will be here and things will
I find that individuals that I've spoken with recently, it's about maintaining a good support system. Because again, we can't control the seasons. We can't control the pandemic and what's going to happen with that. We can control having a system in place so that we find on those days where we say, I don't want to be inside, I feel lonely, what am I going to do? We have something in place where we can reach out to individuals, or other individuals can check on us and say, hey, how are you doing? A lot of times people say, I don't want to be a burden to people. And so you have 5 or 6 people living independently, feeling the same feelings, but not receiving the support that they need. And so I think it's very important during these next few months to have a plan of support in place.
Good, great idea, great suggestion. Anybody else in the audience have any last questions before we wrap up this evening? Anything coming from anyone?
No, I think we've answered all the questions.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Well, I do want to thank you, Kim, very much for sharing your time with us tonight. It was very helpful, very informative, good reminders for people, and all things that I think are easy for us to do if we focus on.
Absolutely.
I liked your diagram of the circle, because that's what I always have told my children, who are young men now. If it's not in your circle, you can't worry about it.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for spending some time with us tonight. And thank you to everyone who's joined us watching. And we do have a couple of more webinars coming up in the near future over the next several weeks. If you want to join us for any of those, I encourage you to go online and register for them. They will be webinars just like this one. We have one next week, which is about estate planning. And then we have another Authentically Augsburg Part 2 coming up. If you didn't join us for Part 1, you can certainly reach out to me and let me know, and I can send you a link to the recording for Part 1. But I encourage you to join us for Part 2. We're going to have 3 different residents talk to us a little bit about Augsburg, and we're going to really talk about what it's been like to live here during 2020 and how we have really had some great successes with our residents, even though we have had a quarantine here. On November 4th, we're going to be talking with My Potential at Home, which is a brand new service that's going to be available here at Augsburg for our independent living residents. It's a home care agency that will be have an office right here in our community. So really excited to share that new service with our independent living residents. And then at the end of November, we'll wrap up with what we're calling Family First. And that is a webinar where we're going to have a few family members who have residents living here at Augsburg. They're going to share a little bit of their experience of having their mother or sister living here with us, and just kind of walk through the process of, from the family's perspective, of how they chose Augsburg and what that has been like for them from the outside looking in. And then we're working on a new series for the winter that will have some new topics, and hopefully you'll be able to join us for those. Thank you again for joining us this evening. I will reach out to you with some follow-up after tonight, and you can certainly reach out if there's any additional information that you'd like to reach Kimberly. Her contact information is available. And until we see you again, take care, everybody. Wear your mask, stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Be well, everyone.